Your strong support for the Jewish people's right to Jerusalem served as a powerful example to others, and your dedication to Zionism for over a century has made you a true partner in the restoration of Jewish sovereignty in our historic homeland. Thank you for all the years of unwavering support and for your steadfast commitment to strengthening our common future. Thank you very much, B'nai B'rith.
I'm going to take you through a sequence. 1979, a guy called Issa Harel was interviewed by an American Christian Zionist journalist. Issa Harel was called the father of Israeli intelligence, Mr. Big. He was involved for a massive amount of time. And he said to this journalist in 1979 that he thought there was going to be an attack by Muslim extremists on your biggest building in New York. And that they would do this because in their philosophy, also in the philosophy of the Kabbalah, by the way, and that whole area of thought, they represent a phallic symbol of America, and it would break the spirit of America, basically, that kind of theme. Also in 1979, a man called Benjamin Netanyahu organized a conference in Jerusalem and then organized another one in '84 in America, focusing on Arabic terrorism and the need to have preemptive strikes on countries to stop terrorism.
The question is really, how do we ensure that these weapons of destruction, these missiles, these chemical weapons, the nuclear program that is fast accelerating in Iraq, that these do not pose a threat in the aftermath of the crisis, assuming it gets out of Kuwait. This is an issue for the entire international community.
So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
Netanyahu's weapons of mass destruction lies were even more extreme a decade later. In the lead up to the war in Iraq, Benjamin Netanyahu testified before the U.S. Congress and claimed there was no question whatsoever about Saddam Hussein's supposed weapons of mass destruction.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Netanyahu also tried, without any evidence, to link the Iraqi government to not just al-Qaeda, but also the Taliban, the extremist Islamist group in Afghanistan.
You're making a connection between the Taliban and Iraq?
Yes, I am. I'm saying that if you look at those who harbor terrorists and those who support terrorists,
I guess I was looking for a connection between September 11th and my understanding why we went to the Taliban is there was a connection there. They were harboring somebody that we believed did the act on September 11th.
Yes, that's the first reason why you did it.
Now you're going to take me from September 11th to Iraq somehow?
Yes, but I'm saying something else. I'm saying the connection is not whether Iraq was directly connected to September 11th, but how do Iraq, Iran, and Libya are racing to develop nuclear weapons.
And it was not just in Iraq where Netanyahu forcefully called for regime change. He also proposed toppling the government in Iran.
Obviously, we like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out?
Israel's extreme right-wing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has a habit of repeatedly claiming without any evidence that his enemies supposedly have weapons of mass destruction.
Tonight, we are going to reveal new and conclusive proof of the secret nuclear weapons program that Iran has been hiding for years from the international community. By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage.
God have mercy upon us.
there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks.
I wonder if you know that I know he's lying right now.
Before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
Why you always lying? Why you always lying? Hubble bubble homo select stop lying.
But a look at some of Netanyahu's public speaking over the past 30 years shows that he has a long history of crying wolf.
And also he wrote a book on the same subject and introduced the concept of a war on terror and weapons of mass destruction also came up in the same period. Then in 1996, an American Israeli called Richard Pearl, who was had a major Pentagon post during 9/11, with other ultra-Zionists, wrote a document for the then Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, called A Clean Break, in which they called for the removal of Saddam Hussein, basically a war on terror, targeting Iran, targeting Syria, and what have you, Iraq with Saddam Hussein. Following year, in 1997, in America, an organization was formed called the Project for the New American Century. This was a think tank co-founded by two absolute ultra-Zionist extremists called William Kristol and Robert Kagan. And in the Project for the New American Century in 1997, and leading up to 9/11, were Dick Cheney, who would become the de facto president at the time of 9/11 as vice president to the hapless George Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, who would be defense secretary at the time of 9/11, Dov Zakheim, who would be comptroller of the Pentagon, controlling the whole Pentagon budget, Richard Pearl, who wrote the Clean Break document, had a Pentagon post. And also in the Project for the New American Century was a man called John Bolton, who has been in the Bush administration until last night as National Security Advisor. In September 2000, oh, by the way, this group then wrote to the then President Clinton urging him to basically invade Iraq and remove Saddam Hussein. This was 1998 they did that. In September 2000, 1 year to the month before 9/11, the Project for the New American Century produced a document calling for American troops to, quote, fight and decisively win multiple theater wars to regime change in a list of countries. And these are all the people I've just named that put this together. A few months after this document came out, they would be in positions of power in the Bush administration and the Pentagon. And the countries they listed were Iraq, regime change, Libya, Syria, Iran, North Korea, Lebanon, and others, including Sudan. Leading, it said, this document, to regime change in China.
The Project for New American Century, which kind of lays out this vision. So dig into that a bit.
When you tell people this is a lie, that is a lie, they inevitably come up with, well, then why did we really go? And they want one answer, and it's always a range of several answers, and even then, you don't quite explain it with rational reasons. Wars that don't make sense, that are doomed to failure.
Talk about the PNAC document. PNAC being Project for New American Century.
The Project for the New American Century, which is a think tank that was around in the 90s and up through 2005 or 6, and then it disappeared, and then came back online in 2009 when the coast was clear, and clearly nobody was getting prosecuted for anything. And there are about 17 members of this so-called think tank who were in top positions in the Bush-Cheney administration, advisor to the president, to the vice president, assistant secretary of defense, and so forth. And a couple of these guys, Feith and Wolfowitz, had earlier worked for Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel and put out a paper that advocated the same kind of program that they then put out papers from PNAC advocating, that is intense nationalism and militarism and going after Middle Eastern states with aggressive wars. And this is what PNAC urged on President Bill Clinton, who agreed with them and made regime change in Iraq one of his goals.
And I think this is very significant, that this PNAC document, although it was mostly Republicans, I believe Lieberman was a supporter of it, if not a signer of it. But Clinton agreed with one of its main propositions, that there are certainly sections of the Democratic Party that are on board with this vision.
Right, and there are several key papers that they published, and the biggest one maybe was in 2000 called Rebuilding America's Defenses, as if they needed to somehow be rebuilt, which was advocating a much larger military, the ability to fight multiple simultaneous wars, an aggressive agenda of going after nations in key regions of American interest, including resource regions, the need to plunder other people's resources. And a lot of it is language about absolute dominance and maintaining control of the world and fending off any possible rival. This is in the shadows of the Cold War having ended and the need existing for some new enemy, and they haven't quite come up with international terrorism or Al-Qaeda yet to fill that gap, but they want to take this opportunity to maintain American dominance.
And get rid of regimes that have gone like this. So you can't have any that have left the U.S. sphere of influence. So Saddam in Iraq, but you also then have Iran, and it's a series of Syria. And so you have to either be in our sphere of influence or you're not going to be.
Right, and you look at what Wesley Clark said about the list of nations that Donald Rumsfeld had, 7 nations we were going to go into in 5 years if the Iraqi people hadn't fought back, I guess.
No, I think it's very important that this issue of that there's a significant section of the Democratic Party leadership either shares this vision or does not abhor it. For example, while Lieberman supported this document, and Lieberman gets chosen as Al Gore's vice president. So there's a whole section here they're more or less on the same page.
There are a lot of factors in that pick, I think, maybe the biggest being Al Gore's pretense that he had never met Bill Clinton and was buddies with one of Clinton's attackers. But I agree that the Democratic Party does not have a vision that is dramatically different from this.
So how about President Obama? He runs in the campaign promising a new mindset on foreign policy. Do you see any indication that Obama has a fundamentally different view than the PNAC document?
Yeah, he talked in the campaign, at least on occasion, about ending the mindset that allows war. Then he went and gave a Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech glorifying war and maintaining that Martin Luther King Jr. had been wrong in his Peace Prize acceptance speech, which if a Republican had done it, we'd still be hearing the outrage. And this is someone who gave an Oval Office speech a couple of months back where he regurgitated all of the lies that Bush had told about these wars, about Iraq, starting back with the weapons of mass destruction on through the lies about the surge that are being used to justify the continuation and escalation in Afghanistan. So there is a problem with the Democrats buying in to the same lies that you get from the Republicans. Well, I think we're encouraging the disintegration of Pakistan, and I think if we were concerned about a conflict, we wouldn't be selling weapons to India. You ought to want a conflict with fewer weapons in it, if that were your concern. And I think that the secrets are not really that deeply buried. There's an incident in the book I describe of an interaction between myself and Mr. Brzezinski, who you like to cite, and who spelled out his reasons in a Rand Corporation affair for why we need to stay in Afghanistan, including reasons like a gas pipeline that aren't talked about endlessly on television, but that are openly stated at events like that, and concern about buffering a war. No, if you look at what these people say in NATO meetings, and there's one happening right now, it's about the irresistible temptation of being able to put bases and weapons, including nuclear weapons, in a country that borders just about every critical country they want to face off against in the world. And Afghanistan is in that location. And knowing full well that it's hopeless and it's a question of how much blood, how much treasure before they pull out, they just can't help themselves. I don't think it's about preventing wars. I think it's about dominating the globe.
But this document said in September 2000, this process of transformation, as they called it, in other words, this regime change, would necessarily be a slow one, this is the quote, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor, that would be a problem that would justify the solution, which was the agenda in this document. These people that wrote that came to power in the Pentagon and the White House in January 2001. And the ultra Zionist Michael Chertoff was appointed head of the criminal division of the Justice Department, who would then, by that role, oversee the criminal investigation into 9/11, non-investigation actually. And in September 2001, America had what Bush called at the time our Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century. As a result of that, this list of countries started being ticked off. And I quote a New York Times report just after 9/11, revealing that on September the 19th and 20th, a group called the Defense Policy Board, including all these characters, including Richard Perle, had met to plot the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. This is days after 9/11. This was planned from the start. Then, in 2007, it's a little bit out of sequence, but it's important to say this. A man called General Clark was interviewed on a internet show called Democracy Now! 2007. And he told an amazing story. He said that, and this guy was Supreme Allied Commander of forces, NATO forces at one point. He was involved in the war against Serbia, etc. He said he went to the Pentagon days after 9/11, and he met Rumsfeld, he met Wolfowitz, the Deputy Defense Secretary, who was also from the Project for the New American Century, ultra Zionist. And he went downstairs and he met a general, friend of his. And the general said to him, we're going to invade Iraq. This is days after 9/11. He said, we're going to invade Iraq. He said, are they involved in 9/11? He said, not that we know, no. Why are we going to invade Iraq? Oh, no. Anyway, he said, I went away. And I came back a few weeks later, by which time America are in Afghanistan. An invasion that had to be, from pure logistics, organized long before 9/11, by the way. And he said, I met the same general. And he said, I said to him, why haven't we invaded Iraq? I thought we were going to invade Iraq. And he said, the general said to me, it's worse than that, sir. He said, well, I've just had this from upstairs, Rumsfeld office. We are going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. What? And he named them. We're going to invade Iraq, regime change Iraq, we're going to regime change Libya, Syria, Iran, so on. North Korea.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second. I said, well, you're too busy. He said, no. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me.
I wanted to get your response to Seymour Hersh's piece in The New Yorker to 2 key points this week. Reporting the Pentagon's established a special planning group within the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a bombing attack on Iran. That this is coming as the Bush administration and Saudi Arabia are pumping money for covert operations into many areas of the Middle East, including Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, in an effort to strengthen Saudi-supported Sunni Islam groups and weaken Iranian-backed Shias. Some of the covert money has been given to jihadist groups in Lebanon with ties to al-Qaeda. Fighting the Shias by funding with Prince Bandar and then with U.S. money not approved by Congress, funding the Sunnis connected to al-Qaeda.
The bedlam, the chaos, the violence in Iraq now is a natural consequence of what Bush and Cheney did in invading Iraq.
Iraq is quickly ripped to shreds, torn apart by religious and ethnic violence, a planned demolition.
I think the most convincing argument was that in order to enhance Israel's position in the Middle East and its security, the nations surrounding it that formed an anti-Israeli bloc had to be broken up into smaller, confessionally homogeneous nation states. So in the case of Iraq, a Kurdistan, a Shiistan, and a Sunnistan.
This objective was openly declared as early as 1996 by the neoconservatives in this document, signed by Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith, a text that accuses Iraq of posing a threat to Israel. Today, the chaos in Iraq has claimed Syria. Entire provinces are beyond the control of Baghdad and Damascus. There, terrorist groups rule supreme, and the West has found itself a new enemy, the head of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The violence has claimed hundreds of thousands of victims, dead, wounded, maimed, and has uprooted millions of Iraqis and Syrians.
You have hundreds of thousands of refugees leaving the area, and nobody asks, what caused this? What caused this terrible human catastrophe? It wasn't an earthquake, it wasn't a typhoon, it was an invasion of a country that was reasonably intact when we invaded it.
The Iraqi manipulation has come at a heavy price to America, $3 trillion. This public money has made the defense industry rich.
Peace is bad for business. War, tension is always very good for business. So money, of course, was a major factor.
So the United States finds itself today essentially engaged in permanent war. And it's a permanent war that benefits some people. There are some people and some entities that are making a lot of money from this endless war.
And so what happened after 9/11 that was in that document in September 2000 was all planned, but it couldn't have happened, they admit it in the document, without 9/11. So what we then had was this series of regime change wars and manufactured civil wars. And they happened under different regimes. You see, this is where the web is the permanent government. The here today, gone tomorrow politicians just come and go. They're for show. So we had Boy George Bush and Tony Blair, another one attached to this web, big time. That's why he does what he does, who oversaw the invasion of Afghanistan. And then they lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to justify an invasion of Iraq to regime change Saddam Hussein. Why did they lie? Because Iraq removing Saddam Hussein was on the list and they had no credible reason to remove him, so they made it up, simple as that. Then they move out, a Republican and what passes for Labour, and in comes a Democrat, Obama, and in comes David Cameron in this country. And they, with NATO, in effect, invade Libya, another one off the list. And then they start the manipulation of Syria that started that catastrophe in Syria. And now Trump's come in, Maverick, and he's been targeting Iran, etc. All on this list. I think he might be starting to just push back on that a bit. Maybe the pennies are dropping with Trump, actually, who's running this show, and it's not been him. So this party political thing is just a mirage. This web is running the show. So who benefits from all this happening? Well, Israel benefits. The Sabbatean Frankist cult that run Israel, which the vast majority of Jewish people in Israel have no idea about, benefits because that's what they wanted all along. That's what the clean break was basically talking about. So let's have a look at this 9/11 that was the new Pearl Harbor, essential to this playing out. How many people know that in 9/11's year of 2001, 200 Israeli people were arrested in America for being part of an Israeli spy ring? 140 before 9/11 and 60 afterwards. Many were posing as art students. How many people know that the centers, particularly one center in Florida, of this spy ring were the same places frequented by the alleged hijackers, including Mohammed Attar, in the same period? How many know that some of these people arrested for being part of this Israeli spy ring actually had homes in the same street as Mohammed Attar, in a place called Hollywood, which was the center of much of what these alleged hijackers were doing and was also the center of this ring? Hello? How many people know that on the morning of 9/11, a lady looked out of her apartment in New Jersey, looking over to the burning tower, the first one, and saw 5 Middle Eastern-looking men filming it, high-fiving and cheering? She took them to be Arabic. She called the police. The police eventually tracked them down. They were traveling around in a white van. They were Israelis. They became known as the Dancing Israelis. They were arrested and kept in custody for 71 days until the ultra-Zionist head of the criminal division of the Justice Department, Michael Chertoff, released them. And how many people know that the same Michael Chertoff released the 200 arrested in the spy ring? And they went back to Israel. These 5 dancing Israelis, 2 of which were known by the police to be Mossad agents, said that they were there to document the event. Well, hold on, how did you know it was going to happen?
And at that point, we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event.
The police then went to where these people worked, and it was a Mossad front called Urban Moving Systems, which was headed by a guy called Dominic Suter.
Said they worked for a company called Urban Moving. The FBI obtained a search warrant for the company's offices.
2 SUVs were filled up with between 9 and 12 boxes and computers.
Not long after the arrests, the offices of Urban Moving were simply abandoned. Almost everything was left behind.
Dominic Suter was interviewed by the FBI and said that they were going to return for a second interview. Well, before they could, he's opted and gone to Israel. And so where was this? One mainstream organization, there was one or two others as well, but one really covered it, and then it was deleted from their archive very quickly. And that, ironically, was Fox News and a reporter called Carl Cameron, who did a series of 4 reports about this. They were excellent.
Several other men were detained after a van full of explosives was stopped outside of Manhattan.
Earlier, we had heard that an FBI spokesperson said that there was a report on the George Washington Bridge, which is another facility which you folks are responsible for policing, a report that there had been a van stopped there that had explosives.
Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to the Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being detained and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they're in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
On March 6, 2002, a draft report from the DEA said it may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity.
It has been more than 16 years since a civilian working for the Navy was charged with passing secrets to Israel. Jonathan Pollard pled guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage and is serving a life sentence. At first, Israeli leaders claimed Pollard was part of a rogue operation, but later took responsibility for his work. Now, Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S.
Since September 11th, more than 60 Israelis have been arrested or detained, either under the new Patriot anti-terrorism law or for immigration violations. A handful of active Israeli military were among those detained, according to investigators, who say some of the detainees also failed polygraph questions when asked about alleged surveillance activities against and in the United States. Investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. A highly placed investigator said there are, quote, tie-ins. But when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying, quote, evidence linking these Israelis to 911 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It's classified information.
Now, when the FBI investigated, it quickly unraveled to be the largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered inside the United States, the largest. Even the Soviet Union had not been spying on the United States as much as Israel has been doing. So the FBI started to round up these spies. They started to arrest them very quietly, and they were about halfway through this process of rounding up this spy ring when 9/11 happened.
Numerous classified documents obtained by Fox News indicate that even prior to September 11th, as many as 140 other Israelis had been detained or arrested in a secretive and sprawling investigation into suspected espionage by Israelis in the United States. Investigators from numerous government agencies are part of a working group that's been compiling evidence since the mid-90s. These documents detail hundreds of incidents in cities and towns across the country that investigators say, quote, may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity. The first part of the investigation focuses on Israelis who say they are art students from the University of Jerusalem and Bezalel Academy. Documents say they, quote, targeted and penetrated military bases, the DEA, FBI, and dozens of other government facilities, and even secret offices and unlisted private homes of law enforcement and intelligence personnel. The majority of those questioned, quote, stated they served in military intelligence, electronic surveillance intercept, and or explosive ordnance units. Why would Israelis spy in and on the U.S.? A General Accounting Office investigation referred to Israel as Country A and said, quote, according to a U.S. intelligence agency, the government of Country A conducts the most aggressive espionage operation against the U.S. of any U.S. ally. The document concludes, quote, Israel possesses the resources and technical capability to achieve its collection objectives.
What about this question of advanced knowledge of what was going to happen on 9/11? How clear are investigators that some Israeli agents may have known something?
Well, it's very explosive information, obviously, and there's a great deal of evidence that they say they have collected, none of it necessarily conclusive. It's more when they put it all together. A bigger question, they say, is how could they not have known? Almost a direct quote, Brett.
It is now apparent that this intelligence ring was inside the U.S., had prior knowledge of 9/11, and had a classified role in 9/11, which officials refused to discuss. It was also able to penetrate U.S. intelligence agencies and secret offices, yet all were released. The men who were detained due to the report they were taping the first plane crash and then celebrating and joking about it actually went on television and admitted it was their job to record the attack. How could they have known about the attack? And who sent them to document it? The evidence points to a large intelligence network inside the United States that had teams on the ground, such as the ones recording the attack, and electronic surveillance teams gathering information.
Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence.
Hey guys, if you want to watch more clips, click here.
And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here.